So, hey guys, this is going to be a short explanation of my ideas and a summarization of Cherry Harris's Whiteness is Property. So I believe a discussion of this is particularly important because most of the time when racism is not explicitly expressed, it escapes people, but they don't understand the heritage of racism existing in the law and society. So this is a way of me somewhat making clear the heritage of the apparently invisible nature of racism in law and society. So here we go. This is the beginning of my summary and explanation of my ideas concerning Cherly Harris's Whiteness is Property. Race exists to create exclusive identities. The exclusive identities exist as a social distributive schema or status property that exists to protect the gained advantages and possessions of those within the privileged racial status. Put another way, race exists as a way in which the political economy knows how to distribute resources and advantages. This pattern of distribution becomes entrenched over time, and even if the rules of distribution are no longer explicitly enforced, de facto patterns of exclusion, as well as the heritage of exclusion, within society and the law that shapes it, will continue the iniquitous pattern of the old. The law, though not explicitly racist in nature, is implicated and descendant of a history of lawmaking and sociological jurisprudence that recognized the idea of whiteness as property. Therefore, the insidious nature of the idea that automatically organizes forms of exclusion predicated on race persists in the law. The law is descendant of a history of enforced exclusions. That's inherently what law is. It's a contract of duties and exclusions, right? But these exclusions were predicated around whiteness, around defining what whiteness is and excluding individuals who do not have the privileged status of whiteness. So, therefore, the insidious nature of the idea that automatically organizes forms of exclusion predicated on race persists in the law. The law is descendant of a history of enforced exclusions that developed legal white supremacy. Even if the law no longer explicitly recognizes race, the building block concepts of race within the law, as well as the racially iniquitous socio-economic structure of America that was protected and assisted by legal protection, perpetuate racist outcomes through the law. Derrida's idea of the trace, Jacques Derrida, writer of Difference and a bunch of other books based on deconstruction and post-structuralism. Derrida's idea of the trace is very important for understanding the traces of white supremacy in the law and society that continue the process of organizing exclusion. The trace can be felt in a number of historically present facts. In the article, the author discusses blacks being subject to the commodification of human beings. Although slavery is technically legally abolished, the societal trace of blacks as chattel still persists in the high incarceration rates of blacks. Blacks are no longer private property of the planter class, but by a large percentage state property of the government. Blacks are still slaves in America, just incompletely so, and the enslaving is carried out by the justice system, not by private individuals or merchants. Private property rights recognizes the white way of interacting with land and resources, i.e. land development. If no land development can be identified, then it is waste. So this was the organizing logic for the conquest of Native American land, right? The idea was that Native Americans were not developing the land, so they had no true title of claim to it. So when the United States was like building railroads and clearing land for farming and clearing land for settlements for white people, they said that the Native Americans did not own the land because they had never tried to develop it, but they were just defining a white way of interacting with land, of building on top of it and clearing it and trying to get things out of the land. So this is one way of possessing the land that is most amenable to the white idea of conquest. Nature conservation is in many ways the Native American approach to land use in the modern sense, and therefore will always be under attack by the historically white conception of land use that demands the action of development in order to recognize a white way of doing things and thereby bestow privileges, without using the words for white people only. Not all first possession and labor gives rise to property rights. This is the Lockean idea of property rights, that once you invest your labor and a portion of your life in something, it is yours. And if it's first possession, you're the first person to own it, then it is yours. But this is not inherently true because, of course, if we're talking about people inhabiting the land, the Native Americans were, of course, the first people to inhabit the land. And also, the way they interacted with the land could be seen as a form of labor. They hunted on the land, they gathered on the land, but this is not recognized as property ownership, right? That's why the Europeans were able to take it from them, because they did not own it, right? Because the way that they possessed the land was not considered true possession. It has to be qualified by a white way of possessing property. Even though blacks are no longer legally barred, and the majority of the time not prevented from owning property, though you may find it considerably difficult to find a home loan if you're a person of African American descent. Whites who have generationally benefited from legal privileges that prevented blacks from competing in property ownership benefit greatly from a conception of property rights that halts and solidifies their claims to previously gained advantages. Though those advantages are no longer explicitly identified as racial property, what has historically been won by iniquity they now get to keep, so unfairness is perpetuated. We do not start the game all over again, even though the rules are different now. So the idea here is that whiteness is property as expressed in the law and society through white supremacy, right? The idea that black people could be barred from, so what happened was is that black people could be barred from owning houses, legally barred from owning houses in certain neighborhoods, and they could be legally barred from getting certain jobs and living in certain places and having certain things. So during all this time where black people were legally barred from doing things, white people accumulated wealth and advantages. They were able to get jobs that black people couldn't get, they were able to own things black people couldn't own, and they were able to live places that black people could not live. So during all this time, white people accumulated a huge amount of advantages, a huge amount of wealth, a huge amount of geographic advantage. And now that the law no longer explicitly recognizes race, it's not as if like white people have to give all this stuff up now and then we start over from the beginning. But since the law solidifies and protects these advantages, it can be seen as racist. Because what the law is saying is that what white people won in the past through evil, even though I'm not saying that white people are evil, like white people are fine. It's just the fact that white supremacy is evil. But what was won through evil, like every white people now get to keep. Like there's no starting the game over, even though a huge amount of advantages and a huge amount of wealth was accumulated through evil. Because the game was rigged and its effects are still felt, I believe this is the reason why the author advocates affirmative action based on whiteness as property. He wishes to dissolve the status of exclusion that perpetuates unfairness, explicit or not, and start the game all over again. I have never seen affirmative action formulated this way before, and honestly is very convincing. It appears that white supremacy would have to either willingly give up its historically accumulated, legally protected advantages, or the game has to legally be forced to start all over again. Still, to some degree, I'm not a huge fan of affirmative action. Like, I understand what the author is saying. The author is saying that there's a huge wall of accumulated advantages given to white people that have been seamlessly worked into an apparently fair society. But the society is only apparently fair if you do not know history. If you knew history, you'd know how white people got all these things, why they are where they are, why they have certain advantages, and why the game is unfair. But I think this can be combated by reversing the severe amount of social, academic, and political disinvestment in the black community. I mean, we can make the game fair if individuals of considerable, you know, intellectual, political, physical talent invest themselves back into the black community in order to give them a competing chance. But the game is rigged and the game is unfair. So those are my ideas. Um, I was thinking about giving a lecture on this, maybe live over YouTube Live. If anyone has any interest in that, please let me know. But yeah, keep your eyes peeled. Thanks a lot. Later.